Yeah. Okay, you got it. All right. I'm going to go back and look at verse 4 of 1 Corinthians 10:4. Just a little bit of information here on it. The spiritual rock that followed, the word followed is a participle, as we noted last week, and it doesn't have the article. And participles, remember, function in two basic ways as adjectives or adverbs. So we call them adjectival participles, functioning as an adjective, and adverbial participles, functioning as adverbs. And if they have the article, they cannot be adverbial with the article. So but this doesn't have the article. So this could be adjectival or adverbial without the article. So we can't tell by the absence of the article whether it's adjectival or adverbial, but it certainly fits pretty well for it to be a following rock, a spiritually following rock. So the could be adverbial, and it's modifying, and it's saying that that rock was following. Now I want to note here, this rock was, and notice this is in perfect tense. It's a being verb, it's perfect tense. And so the rock was being Christ. So the rock was the same as Christ. And this is from a be, which is a being verb. And so it was being in perfect tense, and it was being Christ the Messiah. Right? Now, let's look here and how I changed my translation a bit. Again, I'm going to go back after this class is over. We'll go back to these notes and make some modification in my notes. They did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank out of the spiritual rock following. See, it was a rock that was following, and the rock was being Christ, was being the Messiah. Okay, right. Does that make sense? That's how I went with it after we had our discussion. Any questions or comments, Jerry?
No, I think it's based upon him being the Word, and that was what flowed out of him, was always the Word.
So let's go to verse 5. 1 Corinthians 10:5. Now he is referring to the children of Israel here, keep in mind, in this context here. All right, Jerry, can you do that? Verse 5, please.
All uk in tois, pleosin, aton, eudokesin, ho theos, katastrophason, gar in te eremo. And I put either but or yet. I think I finally put yet. God was not well pleased with most of them. And now I waffle between for and as a result. And I think as a result fits better. As a result, they died in the desert or wilderness.
So he wasn't well pleased with actually the Greek word is the greater part, so it's more than half of them. And most of them, as the context shows, it was most of them. He was not well pleased. And the word for, gar, explains or shows you the reason. How do we know he wasn't well pleased? Because what happened to them is what?
Yeah, they died.
Yeah, they were overthrown in the wilderness, and many of them died, okay? And most of them actually died in the wilderness and never entered the land of Canaan, see? And so this gar is going to give you the reason why we know that he was not well pleased with them. If he had been well pleased, they would have entered Canaan, okay? The ones with whom he was well pleased, and that would be Joshua and Caleb, they entered Canaan. Now, I've had people to tell me, Marion, do you think Joshua's wife and Caleb's wife were faithful? I think they probably were. I think Joshua and Caleb represented their families, and their families were faithful with them. I don't have any evidence that their wives deserted and lost, but I don't know. It's not one of those things we can tell. But I suspect that they were faithful, and Joshua and Caleb just represented their families. That's what probably was the case.
And Joshua said, "As for me and my household, we'll follow the Lord." So he's including them, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're faithful too with him. He led them, and they followed him. And I think Caleb was probably the same way. But again, we can't say for sure. But I strongly suspect that they were, and that these were the two men, and their families followed them. They were overthrown. That is, they were. Look at the meaning of this word right in the middle of the screen. They were strewn over the ground. Okay, they're laid low. All right, it's like a mowing machine mowed them down. You know, they're strewn all over the ground, and so they died in the wilderness, and that was before they came into the land of Canaan.
I wonder if they were buried. They took the time to bury the dead. It's hard to imagine God would not have let them go ahead and bury them or had them bury them.
Yeah, I think they probably were. But the dead bodies of the unbelieving Israelites, they were not. They were told by the law of Moses not to let a dead body lie out. And,
because of disease.
And I suspect they followed the law. They were trying to do what was right, even though they'd messed up. And some of those people may actually be in heaven. They may have repented, but they were, like Moses, they weren't going to be allowed to enter in because of their sin. And I don't know. I suspect that the bulk of them won't be in heaven. Maybe none of them. So I don't know whether they repented, but Moses repented, and he didn't get to enter because of his sin. And so it's possible others. In Numbers chapter 14, verse 16, this word is used for the unbelieving Israelites where they were strewn in the wilderness. And Numbers 14, verses 29 through 33 listed. It's on the screen up here. Okay, so we have that there. And so they were strewn out. But with many of them, God was not well pleased. And the reason we know is because they are overthrown in the wilderness now. They would not have been overthrown if he had been pleased with them. I think that's the word "gar" is giving you the reason for it. Right? Now then, he tells us two things here. We're going to see the two different things here. That we see one in this verse and another point later. And some people see them as one thing, but I see them as two things. Number one, the things happened as an example, and also they're written down for an example, okay, for the readers who would read after them, who would read the books of Numbers and other books that recorded this. So let's look at, let's see, who read last?
I did.
Okay. Yes, could you read verse 6 for us, please?
Yes. Tata de tupoi hemon again they son ace to me and I hemos epithumetas kakon kathos kakenoi epithumeson. Have now these things took a view to what after that we would not lust evil as evil they did.
Not lust after evil things, lust after. All right. Now these things were, and this is from Genomai, they became, this is to become. It came into existence, began to be. and they were our examples. Tupoi types, tupos. So they serve as a type, a pattern for us. This is the object of this word, to become. Now, baptism of Israel, the cloud in the sea, was the type of baptism. The manna was the type of Christ. The rock that gave water to us was the type of Christ. And the water probably was the type of his word, his message he brought. Right? Any comments, questions before we, okay? To the intent, and this is the word ace with the article. And Dan and Manny say this is a result clause, this construction of a result, or a purpose clause. It could be a purpose clause. And so the result was that we should not lust after evil things. So the purpose or the result was, it could be either, and the structure could be either a purpose or a result statement. And I've chosen it as a purpose, as a result, statement, but it could be a result or a purpose, either one. And either one will pretty well fit the context to the intent that we should not. So the purpose or the result is that we should not lust after evil things. Now, epithumentes, it's from a verb form is epithumeo, and this is a person. See, notice the tase ending. The ending here, right here, I'll highlight it. This tase ending right here in that word is one who does it. Baptistes is one who baptizes. Mathetes is one who is a disciple. So that tase ending is one who is a practitioner of it. So it was intending that we should not make it a practice or be a practitioner of lusting, craving evil things. Right? Now, this is from kakos, and it's genitive plural kakos. Something that is bad, wrong, wicked. Right? As kathos, adverb of manner, in the same manner, they also. Now, this is two words combined. Notice the words here. It is kai, and I'll highlight it here, and the kainos combined. Our process of combining words called crosses. And it's referring, ikainos is the remote object. And as they, see, he's talking to people in Corinth and writing to them, and then the word ikainos refers back to those people back in Numbers, back in the wilderness. And kai, of course, could be even or and so he also, and he also, or it could be translated also, and or also.
That's the way I translated it.
Right? And the American Standard translated they also, or those ones also, more literally, those also lusted. Those who, those in the wilderness. And so they lusted. Now this is a verb, and it's third person plural, aorist. And Thayer defines it as keep the thumos, or we get our word thymus gland from this right here, turned up on the thing, and that's what heats your body up, see? Set your heart upon it, the desire for it, lust after covet. Now the word epithumeo is not always a bad word. It's used in a good sense in some places. It's used one time, once or twice, for Jesus had a strong desire for something. And so it's not wrong to have a strong desire for something if it's lawful, or if you have a strong desire to do something good. So now then, let's look at the a fortiori argument. What we see is what's true of the lesser is true of the greater. it proves that the record of the sins of the early church and God's response to them found in the New Testament also serves as examples for us. That if these things that God did in punishing them was intended for us, then we would argue then that almost certainly the times of such as Ananias and Sapphira and people like that, that would be a warning to us too. Okay, I would argue that it would be a lesson for us as well. Okay. And I discussed it quite a lot in my Work of the Holy Spirit, Volume 1, published in 2003, Appendix B. And here's my argument. If the New Testament system is greater than the Old Testament system, specifically the Law of Moses, then what is true of the lesser of the Old Testament system is true of the New Testament system, the greater. And the New Testament is greater than the Old, and the book of Hebrews tells us it's a greater covenant, a better covenant, calls it better. And what is true of the lesser, the Old Testament, the Law of Moses, is true of the New Testament system, the better system. Since the sins and God's response to their sins serve as examples for us today, the sins of the first century people, the children of God, and God's response to those sins serve as examples to us today as well. I think we're right, and many preachers that I know have used these things as examples. I believe they're right to do it. And we see a God that's timeless, and he does not change, and so he's going to function the same way. Any comments? So I translated in verse 6, now these things were our examples, and I footnoted it were our types, to the intent that we are not to lust after evil things as those also lusted. Right? Those in the wilderness and also lusted. Questions or comments? Back to Jerry, I think, if you go, Jerry.
Mayday, idololat tri, ganeste, kathos, tenez, aton, prosper, gigroptai, hic, thesan, ho, laos, phagain, kai, paean, kai, anestason, kaidsain, and I put neither become idolaters, as certain of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play.
Okay. And Mayday continues a negation. I don't have that proof in here, or side of a source, but if you have my file that I've sent out on the lexicon and grammar notes, Greek lexicon and grammar notes file, about 400 pages long. There's in that, if you check Mayday in this word here, Mayday up here, and find it, it'll be in that file, and it'll tell you it continues a negation. And the reason it continues a negation is because of the delta epsilon, the day ending. That's what causes it to continue, right? So neither continues. See, it pulls it back in to that same thought. Don't you do what they did, and furthermore, don't you become. And this is middle passive. Would you agree with me? It's probably middle. Cause yourself to become idolaters. They weren't forced to be idolaters. They became, and they became idolaters. Right? Ginomai takes its object in the nominative case as a predicate nominative. So ginomai is one of those verbs that takes an object in the nominative case. So idolaters here is nominative plural. It's actually a predicate nominative. See, and that's what I've noted down here at the bottom. It's a predicate nominative because ginomai has to have its object in the nominative case, a predicate nominative. As in the same manner, this is kathos we had earlier, in the same manner as were some of them. So all of them didn't become, and this word some is tis, which is the certain ones. So who are the certain ones? Now, certain person is someone particular you pointed out, but he just pointed out the better part of them, the greater number of them, fell and were destroyed. And we know for sure that there were two that weren't. And I assume probably their families went with them and were faithful. And as you quoted the words of Joshua later, his family appeared to be with him. And so he spoke for them. And I would assume Caleb probably the same way. But there may have been others who did repent, but they went ahead and had to die because they had committed this sin. And just like Moses, we know he didn't get to enter in, and neither did Aaron and Miriam. Both died before they entered as well. So certain ones, this is not just any old person, it's someone particular that he's not naming, but the context will tell you who they are. So certain ones of them, as it is written. Now, what tense is it is written?
Perfect passive.
Yeah, it's perfect middle passive, okay? I think it's probably passive. I would agree with you on that, but it is perfect tense. So what does the perfect tense do? We don't have anything like it in English, do we?
Mm-hmm.
English doesn't.
It's true then, it still is.
True then, it still is. It was written, and we have the existing results of that having been written. We still have it here.
And I put it as it is written, just to give it some way of saying that.
Yeah, that's how the American Standard rendered it. But keep in mind, it was written, and it's still true, and it was true, and it still has the same force because it's still truth. The people, now he's quoting now, they sat down to eat, right? And so they ate and devoured and consumed the meal. Now, eating is not necessarily bad unless they're eating something they shouldn't be eating. And to drink. Now, their drinking might have been alcoholic beverages. We don't know. It could very easily have been. Because to see what happened, they rose up and did what happened then.
To play.
To play. Now, what we find in the context, if we go back to it, their playing was lascivious, right? And so the present infinitive by Zane, and so this is to play, and well to notice that they continually played, and so the verb genese is in the imperative mood in the middle voice, right? Let's go back and look at it. Because he says, do not become, neither be ye, see. Let's go back to be, neither become ye. And notice it's imperative mood.
Oh.
Now, what is the present imperative? We come back to it now. I wanted to make a point on it. All right. We have the aorist imperative or aorist subjunctive, either way. Either one of those could function as a commandment. Aorist would be don't begin it. And present tense would be stop doing it. Okay, or don't keep on doing it. Don't continue doing it. Neither continue to become idolaters. Now, God could forgive them of their idolatry, but if they kept on dabbling in it and kept on doing it, at some point, God says enough's enough, doesn't he? That's what happens, as were some of them. So, but this is present tense, imperative mood. Probably middle voice, cause yourself to become and keep on doing that, say. They rose up to play, and there was lasciviousness involved in it. And let me point here, I have quote on the bottom where ginomai takes it's a linking verb, and so it takes its verb appears completed of it. That's like its object is in the nominative case, like the subject. It's often called a predicate nominative. That's right on the bottom of the screen right now. Okay. There are others as well that say the same thing.
So this one says that one form of idolatry is the eating and drinking and rising up to play.
Well,
And it was, since it's a continuation of the other one, then it's based upon lust.
yes, but their idolatry, you're going to make an idol. What are you going to want to do? You want that idol to let you do and to tell you it's okay to do what you want to do. And what do people want to do? Some things that are sinful. And so a lot of the idolatry of that ancient time was had fornication involved in that idolatry.
There's probably still baggage from Egypt.
Yeah.
They haven't gotten rid of.
And so a lot of it had fornication in it. And I think if you study it more carefully, you'll find that they committed fornication in their wilderness. So this is Paul's first warning to them. Do not commit idolatry. Well, he's talking to people at Corinth. What temple was at Corinth? The temple of who?
Aphrodite.
Aphrodite Pandemos. Okay. And so Aphrodite was supposedly there were 1,000 priestesses that plied their trade there in Corinth. 1,000 of them, supposedly. And if that's true from what the writings we find, that's a lot of women out as prostitutes. 1,000 women in a town of maybe 200,000 people. That's about one out of every, well, if you got one out of every, that's about one out of every 100 women is a prostitute. That's quite a significant number. If you have 200,000 people in the city, and of course, there would be children too, and of course, half of them would be men as well. So stop becoming idolaters, as some of them were doing, as it is written. So he's talking to the church, and he's not talking about those in the past. So he's telling them, you get out of idolatry and quit messing with it. You can't be an idolater and a Christian together. You can't mix them. And so you can't be in a false religion and be a Christian. I don't think a Christian has any business joining the Masonic Lodge, for example. I think it's a religion. Okay? But that's a question I'm convinced in my mind it is. Right? There may be other organizations that function like a religion too, and so you can't be part of them either. Stop becoming idolaters. That's how I translate it. Some of them were doing is in italics, as it is written. The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Now, see that what's quoted here refers back to the people in the wilderness, but the first part is addressed to those at Corinth. Tell them, don't you do what they did. All right? Does that make sense? Any question? Well, I've forgotten who read last week.
I'm next.
You're next. Okay. Can you do verse 8 for us, please?
Yes. Mayday, pone omen. Pone omen. Kathos, tenes, tone. Eporneouson, kai, epison, in, mia, emera, ecusi, trace, exiladis. I have neither let us commit fornication as some of them committed and fell in one day, 23,000.
Okay. So we found 23,000, but we find another passage that talks about 20,000, and we have 24,000, I think it was, 24,000. So what we run into then is there a conflict here? Well, this says in how many days, 23,000.
One.
And it appears when we read the text of in the books of Numbers that this went on for 2 days. And that's what it appears. And so there could be 23,000 in one day, and then the next day maybe 1,000 more. And that's when Phinehas come in and killed one guy and stopped it right then. Phinehas became the high priest. Okay. One guy was committing fornication right there in his tent, and just brought her right in. Right
Jacqueline
in
didn't wrong too.
That's through both of them. Okay. So let us not neither, and again, Mayday again continues the negation. Thayer tells us this, but I have some other sources that tell it too. Look at right in the middle of the screen, used in continuing a negation or prohibition. Now, the reason it continues is because of the day, delta epsilon. That's what makes it continue. May by itself doesn't continue, it just negates. But this right here continues it. Now, it's may, not uday, because it's continuing a prohibition, say a negation or a prohibition. And so, neither let us commit fornication. And that, of course, is a subjunctive mood, right? And so, because as what? Certain ones of them, or some of them, committed. So we know they were committing fornication. This passage tells us they were, and those in the wilderness. And of course, we go back and do more reading, we'll see that the Old Testament even says they did. And they fell what?
One day.
In one day, right? One day, 3 and 20,000. This is Paul's second warning to them, do not commit fornication. Now, these were linked, particularly at Corinth, and they were linked in the ancient customs. If you're going to make your own religion, you're going to have it to tell you to do what you want to do, okay? And they created those, idolatry was created for the people to satisfy their desires and to make the priests that were functioning there, make them wealthy too. But if they're going to do that, they're going to have to get the people to go along with what they're doing. So I translated this, neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed and fell in one day 23,000.
Could you put, I put, nor, or should we commit fornication as certain of them committed fornication, because it's still the same word. It's
Well,
just a different.
You could.
It's one's aorist and the other one's not, but.
Well, you could have had neither in the prior verse and nor in this verse, neither nor fit together.
Yeah, but there's the committed fornication. I added the second word. As some of them committed, but I added the fornication in because it's the same word as above. It's just aorist instead of present. But.
Yeah.
And actually, I originally put, neither should we commit fornication as certain of them fornicated. And as a result, 23,000 fell in one day. Because to get the aorist in there.
Yeah, and they
so
did.
Committed could do it too.
Well, the first one, neither let us commit fornication is present tense, subjunctive. It's an exhortation. And then the committing fornication is aorist, and so that would be they fornicated. That probably would be more literal, wouldn't it?
Well, that's, to be consistent, I added the word fornication in on both of them.
Yeah, I think maybe you're probably right. It's a little bit of interpretation, not literal. Some of them committed, right? I'll probably change mine around, at least footnote it that way, okay? Any questions or comments? I think we got time for maybe one more verse or maybe two, we'll see. The difficulties with this passage, let me get them to you. There were 24,000 that died in the plague in Numbers 25:9, but this passage has 23,000. And those that died by the plague were 20 and 4,000. Now, atheists claim this is a contradiction. I don't believe it is, because they're assuming that the plague only lasted one day. If the plague lasted more than one day, such as 2 days, then we could have had 23 dying on the first day and 22,000 and 1,000 on the second day. And of course, Phinehas stopped the plague on the second day, if you read that in that text. So again, the atheist claims there's a contradiction here, but it's not, it doesn't logically follow. Right. Any comments there? And I've got the passages in the notes here. It cannot be proven the plague only lasted one day, and this is a reasonable explanation. I think we can't say for certain it lasted more than one day, but it sure appears that it did. All right. Now then, he has another neither. May day again, continuing in negation. All right. Verse 9, please.
Mayday, ek pe razzomen ton, Christon, kathos, kai, tenez, aton, Pepe Rasan Kai Hupo Tone O Feon Apo Loton Lonto. Nor should we tempt the Christ, as also certain of them tempted, and caused themselves to perish by the serpents.
Okay. The word Christ is there's a textual variant here, and I went with the one that has Christ in it. But look at the text here in just a minute. So they made trial of the Lord of Christ, as certain ones, and again, this teenage of them made trial. Now, this is translated tempt by the King James, but it's trial, make trial, American Standard. There are two different words. God is not tempted with evil, but he is tried. We will try his patience and put him to trial to see how far he'll go. And we can get by with it. Think of it that way. So what I see here is God is made trial of, but he is actually, I think the King James probably kind of misses it with the word tempted. All right? And they perished, they died, and they're brought to ruin. And this is middle voice, it's aorist middle. Now, I want you to watch that. They perished, it's translated like it's passive, but it's actually middle. So how would you render that?
I put caused themselves to perish.
Yep, I believe that's it. That's what I have right in the middle of the page, if you look at it. And middle voice caused themselves to perish. So they caused it, they brought it upon themselves. And they perished by the serpents. Now, what kind of serpents were these? They're called what? Fiery serpents by the King James American Standard. Numbers 21 and Deuteronomy 8. All right. So they're called fiery serpents. Do you know what Hebrew word that is used and employed for the fiery serpents?
Probably Satan.
Same word translated seraphim.
Oh, seraphim.
A seraphim is a shiny angel.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
seraphims are angels, although it's hard to prove it from Scripture. I think I can make an argument. I'm trying to develop an argument. I think we had angelic beings, and that would include cherubim and seraphim and other beings. Right.
So you're saying maybe an angelic being did this?
Well,
And slithery things.
well, they were fiery serpents, and it's the same word used for a seraphim. It's the same Hebrew word. And so it could have been that God turned the seraphim loose, and the seraphim were killing them. Right? May not even be a serpent, and we may have just interpreted it that way. But I think we can see other passages because he used the word for serpent here. So the seraphim could have taken on the form of a serpent to bite them. Does that make sense? And so, but again, it may be that they're just shining and they're fiery, and the seraphim is a shining angel. And I think the seraphim were some kind of ruling angels. That's what I think, but I don't know that for sure.
Well, it might have been that he made these serpents different than other serpents too in appearance, so they would know.
Yeah.
There'd be no doubt that this was punishment, not just a coincidence.
And so they had fire on them. It actually may have had a literal fire. And these serpents were created for that.
It might feel like fire too if you got bit by one of them.
Yeah. And so I translated, and I think the third one, don't make trial of deity of God, and rather than tempt.
Yeah, I changed that.
Okay. And so I translated, neither let us make trial of Christ, as some of them made trial and perished by the serpents. Let's look down here, see if we can find it. Well, let's go back to it. There it is. Majority text reading is supported by all these manuscripts up here. Right? It's also found in Nestle Aland's 28th edition. So most of the modern people agree that it ought to be translated here as the majority text reads.
With Christ being there?
Yep. Right. So this is the Nestle Aland's 28th edition, and it's supported by all these other documents there, okay? All right. All right. And we got another word that's omitted. Let's go back and see. That'd be footnote 311. Let's find it here. Kai. Now, kathos, and according as, it's kata, hos is what kathos comes from. Kata would become kath with an apostrophe. And then kai, even as also. So this word is omitted. Let's look at the word places it's omitted. It's omitted by the critical text and some of the majority text. It's in some of the majority text. It's in C, F35, Texas Receptions, and some other manuscripts. About 5 more minutes we'll be through, okay? So I went ahead and had the word chi in there. There's nothing critical as to our interpretation. It requires it to be there. 312, let's see what's there. 312. There's a different spelling of this word here, okay? And the majority text has it spelled the way I went with it, okay? Again, I don't think you'll find a great problem as far as interpretation of looking at using the critical text on this. But all of these manuscripts, now the majority text is like 90% of all the Greek manuscripts. Then these other manuscripts are not part of that, except F35 is part of it. But I think F35 is probably the correct Greek text. But that's the position I've held for some time. Okay. Again, there's a lot of people disagree with me on that. I'll be aware of that. Okay. Any questions? All right. Now, we got enough time probably. Make trial of deity. Do we have time for verse 10?
Yeah, we got 5 more minutes.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do verse 10, then we'll stop and sit and stop for the summer.
Okay. May Day, Gogenzete, Kathos, Kai, Tenes, Aton, Ego, Gnuson, Kai, Apolonto, Po, Tu, Alo, Thuruto. I have, neither you all murmur or stop murmuring, as even certain ones of them murmured and perished by the destroyer.
Okay, it's present and it's imperative. See, don't keep on murmuring. So, in the prohibition in present tense, it's on about the 5th line from the top on the screen up here. A prohibition in the present imperative means to forbid the continuance of an act. It commands to quit doing a thing. So we have some problems in the church at Corinth. Somebody was murmuring. Somebody had been murmuring. We can have people murmuring, and murmuring is something that happens if you're not careful. We can get involved in it. I don't like the way they did this or that. I don't like the fact that they changed from 2 songs before the sermon instead of 3. And that I don't like the fact that they put the Lord's Supper after the sermon than it was before. Something like that, and they're murmuring about it. Right? As some or certain ones, it's again, it's 10 certain ones of them murmured. I began to do a study on the sins of the tongue one time, and I've got a bunch of sermons made up, and I was going to make them into a study book. But I just never have finished it. I had good intentions, but I just run out of time and got involved with something else. This perished is again middle voice. It caused himself to perish by the destroyer. Okay. So Paul's 4th warning is do not murmur, or quit murmuring. Basically, would be better. I translated it, stop murmuring, as some of them murmured and perished by the destroyer. And I need to change that perish to cause themselves to perish by the destroyer. Okay, because that's middle voice. All right.
That's the way I did it.
Any questions there? All right. We're going to